I want to film, but at the same time, I don't want to film, and I don't know how to film in a way that doesn't make it obvious to you that I really don't want to film. I just spent like an hour thinking about these questions that are really quite straightforward, and it's illustrative of why I don't do tags anymore. When I'm really the kind of person who just like goes stream of consciousness, I need to stop trying to prepare because that shit's terror. It's just so much in my mind. I can't do it, but I did it this time. So if you'll please stick with me through this tag to hear how my reading has been. Hi everyone, I'm Josh. Welcome to my mid-year freakout tag. This is not the only mid-year tag I'm hoping to make, which is to say I want to do a mid-year stats video. I did not do a stats video for quarter one. I don't think I'm going to be doing quarterly stats anymore. But for now, let's talk about, I guess, just this tag. It seems really popular. So it is the mid-year freakout tag. It's June 26th as I'm filming this, so we're like very close to the middle of the year. I should be more stressed than I am for a number of reasons, the biggest one being that I'm going to be defending my dissertation in almost a month and a half, or in a month and a half, which is why I've been a little slow with some content, because I should be writing right now. But we're here, so let's just get on with the first one, the best book you've read this year. And I must say, this one was a lot easier than I feel like it was in the past. But this one's going to be Exhalation by Chami. I have not done a review for this yet, because I haven't done my May wrap-up. But this book is by far my favorite book of the year. These stories, these short stories were so well developed. Speculative sci-fi fantasy stories that are rooted really, I think, in very sound scientific themes. Even at the end of every story, he talks about what sparked that idea. And oftentimes there's this underlying scientific premise or scientific philosophy that's sort of inspiring the idea behind it. And it's so well constructed. It's so mind-blowing how well it is sort of diving into this idea and using it to create a really rich world. This book is spectacular. Favorite of the year, probably going to stay that way. We'll see. This is pretty high up there. 5 out of 5 stars. Highly recommended if you like speculative sci-fi short stories. I think they're very accessible. As a scientist, I want to see a very science-rich story. But it doesn't mean it can't be accessible. I mean, just look at The Martian. I haven't read The Martian, but I mean, it's pretty popular for a reason, right? It proves how you can make something based in science and inspire that side of the reader without making it too, esoteric. Okay, next up is the best sequel you've read of 2022. For this one, I don't feel quite as excited about this choice. I'm going to start with a few runner-ups. There is Peril of the Talents by Octavia Butler, which probably would be this option if it wasn't a reread, because I reread it this year for the Octavia Butler slow read. I think I read it first in December, so it can't count as a new book. So I don't feel comfortable saying this is a favorite sequel of the year when it's a reread. It's kind of cheating. Now, a good runner-up here that I have for the first time this year was Dragon Republic. It was a solid sequel. Possibly the best book in the trilogy. Really well done, really well executed, and I think really does a job setting up the finale. But the one I'm actually going to go with here, based solely on my rating at the time when I rated these two books, this was a firm 5-star. That is Where the Drowned Girls Go by Seanan McGuire. And I say this one particularly, not just because I'm a huge Seanan McGuire fan, like one of the tops of all time, right up there next to Octavia Butler, but because books 5 and 6, they were like, I liked them, but they, as much as I love Seanan McGuire, they just weren't up to par in my opinion of the other books. Number 6 in particular, there was something about it that just did not resonate with me. But for this one, I liked it because it introduced something new while returning to the roots of the story. It was like, it's still solidly based in this world while being a brand new perspective and just sort of embracing everything I love about this story and the dark bleakness of it and the hints of hope that exists within it. I absolutely adore this story. I hope they all continue to be as great as this one. And even if they're not, to be honest, I would take plenty of mediocre stories in this world forever and ever. Please take my money, Seanan McGuire. Next up is a new release you want to read that you haven't read yet. And for what it's worth, most of the books that I intend to read this year that are new releases, I've already read. There are some books I do want to read eventually, but probably not this year. For example, Manhunt by Gretchen something. And this was a, alternative dystopian future where all men die. Oh, I say men. Yeah, people with testosterone die off. And it includes a deep conversation about gender and transness, and there's a lot of controversy because she kills off screen, to be fair, but kills off JFK, J.K. Rowling. That's one I do want to read, but if I'm being honest, I'm not going to read it this year, so I don't think it works for this option. The ones that I'm thinking about that I'll probably read that are already out, there are two. Witch 13 by Patrick Delaney. This was a arc that I've got, and I do want to read it. I was holding off because I thought it was going to be released on audio. Then I found that it's not. His last two novels that he released were on audio. The one from 2020 came out in September of that year, and the audio came out in November. So I'm still holding out hope that between now and the end of the year, this book will get an audio adaptation, because I really want to listen to it. It makes the experience better for me. This is a dark fantasy horror book that I think has to do with witches, or maybe kind of like the Crucible type witches, but I'm still sure it's rooted in some type of supernatural fantasy horror. And that's right up my alley when it comes to horror. I love fantasy horror. So I do really want to get to that if it releases on audio. The other one that I think I'm more likely to read, that I still haven't read, which is still one that I don't think people will be very interested in, that is An Infinity of Worlds. This is one that is another arc that I need to read, that I do want to get to. It's not on audio, I don't expect it to be, but it's one that I think I'll be fine reading, what's the word I'm looking for? Hybrid, in the sense that I'll use text-to-speech, but I'll probably need to sit down and follow along with the text. It's essentially about the origin of the universe as we know it, the Big Bang, and what might have preceded that, and with some talks about the multiverse. I like the idea of this kind of conversation because people have this misconception that the Big Bang is the origin of all the space-time, when in reality the Big Bang is just speaking about the history of the universe up to the point of when all of space-time was concentrated in one little tiny point. Prior to that, we don't know what happened. There could have been space-time prior to that we can't see anymore, in the same way that we can't see evidence of the early Earth in geology because it's been recycled. That's sort of what the Big Bang could do. Or the Big Bang might quite literally be the beginning of everything. Like space-time itself might end there. What happens before that, we don't know. And it's going to be sort of about that conversation. It's sort of theoretical physics, right up my alley. I'm really looking forward to it. I know a lot of you probably aren't. My channel, my interests. But I appreciate you hearing me out at least. My most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And I'm going to focus on books that I think I'll be reading before the year is out. First one I want to mention here, I feel it's not as if I jump on every Stephen King release, and I haven't. There's several of his newest releases I've just stopped reading for a number of reasons. Part of it is I feel like he kind of recycles old ideas and not as good as they used to be. The thing is though, is that Stephen King, while he has so much mediocrity in his work, there are books that resonate with me really well. Some of them being in my top 10 of all-time favorites. I just mentioned rereading his time travel book. Despite its imperfections, I love it. I love rereading it. This is a fantasy horror. It means we're getting rid of that, leaving that stupid detective crime drama he's been focused on the last decade that I really have no interest in. And so I'm very intrigued. It's about a boy who gets thrust into some fantasy horror world. The thing is, though, my hesitation here is that this isn't new. I mean, The Talisman or Bleak House, which one of those was the first one with the sequel, as well as The Dark Tower, these are all stories about young teen boys being thrust into fantasy worlds where things aren't quite what you expect. In the same way that I thought The Institute was a rehash of The Firestarter, and also to an extent The Outsider was sort of rehashing some of the ideas of It, which is a bigger conversation to itself. I feel like he's recycling old ideas. Maybe I'm being too judgmental about how he's recycling them, because they're still brand new ideas, but just at the core you can characterize these stories as the same basic premises, and I don't love that. Is he out of ideas? This is what I'm wondering. Nevertheless, I am very intrigued by the type of story we're getting here, enough that I'll almost certainly pick it up and jump on it when the time comes. But another one I want to mention here is one that I haven't thought much about, but one that I'll probably almost certainly try to prioritize. That is A Sparman by Mary Robinette Kowal. And she is an all-time favorite author. She writes the Calculating Stars or the Lady Astronaut series. This story is essentially a murder mystery set on the moon. There's the moon colony, and there's a murder mystery. I don't remember exactly what the story is based on, or basically she's retelling an old story but set on the moon. I love space, and I love the type of writing and stories that Mary Robinette Kowal writes. So I'm absolutely here for this, and I'm going to try my best to get to this year when it comes out in October, actually. What else? Two other ones that I'll mention just in passing. The Biggest Ideas in the Universe, a new book by Sean Carroll, favorite scientist of mine, and also I love his work when it comes to science writing. Here's a book. This one's, though, is like about, I think, the basics of physics. It's more like introduction to regular readers on some of the basic concepts in physics. I'm not the most excited about this, but I have an e-arc, and I'll end up getting to it sometime this year, almost certainly. Into the Wind-Whacked Wilds, the newest book in a Deborah Baker series. I'll read that. I can't say I'm the most excited for it, but, you know, I'm excited enough that I'll be reading it as soon as it comes out, that's for sure. Okay, next up, the biggest disappointment. Oh, let's talk about Chami McGuire, and here we are again. I love and I adore her. If you're watching this, I adore you, I adore the story, I really do. But we cannot ignore the fact that Seasonal Fears is a massive disappointment. It is not on par with its sister novel, Middle Game. And it's not trying to be fair. Like, I'm hesitant to say, like, well, am I happy having this? Nothing at all, probably. But at the same time, like, I was so excited getting something new when we got that really shitty play that was The Cursed Child. And in retrospect, like, that really just shouldn't have been made. The world was better, is worse off for it. And now I'm wondering whether or not, in the long term, when I look back on this, will this hurt or help the world? As a lover of the world, I love how this story expands on the world of Middle Game, but I wonder if it scars the system. It's like looking at Supernatural, being so strong of a story, the first 5 seasons, and it goes on 15 seasons long total. And so it is more shit than it is good. This isn't shit, to be clear. Supernatural is a mediocre show because of the fact that they didn't have what it took to end it when it needed to be ended. It could have been one of the best shows of all time, and instead they chose to, you know, take it because they could. And I don't know how I feel. Like I already said about the Children with the Corn, the Wayward Children series. Like, I want more of that, even if it's not good. And I don't know if that's the right idea for me to have or not, because it's kind of gluttonous of me. I want things that I like. It's like one of those things where I don't know what I like. I don't know what I'm missing if this is the energy being put into this. So it's like, I don't know, kind of hurting myself. It's like when I eat a bunch of sugar. I love the sugar, but I'm also killing myself slowly. So is it really that good for me? So yeah, this book was a disappointment. It's not a bad book. I still generally like it. I'm going to reread it probably multiple times. But it's still a disappointment. And that's what this word means. Not bad, but a disappointment. Some people would call it bad. And I don't feel strongly enough to argue with them. I still feel embarrassed talking shit about a Chami McGuire book. Clearly, I am not a good source to get reliable, unbiased views. Okay, biggest disappointment. I already just said that. Biggest surprise. Dun 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 dun. I think if you follow my channel, you probably might know this. It's going to be Sea of Tranquility. And this is one of those books that I almost didn't read. And if I'm being honest, I only read it because of FOMO, fear of missing out. And thankfully, I liked it because it would have sucked to push through or DNF another arc that I requested ill-advisedly. And this was an ill-advised arc, to be frank. Like, I don't love Emily St. John Mandel enough, I think, to really request an arc and get to it like that. After The Glass Hotel, which was just not up my alley, and even Station 11, which I've read twice and thoroughly liked, but not thrilled enough to really love. I shouldn't have requested this, but I did. And when it came to time travel and the premise of the story, her sort of character study, interconnected character study over a sort of spanning time span, just worked really well in a way that really resonated with me. I am not necessarily ready to say, oh, I'm going to love every St. John Mandel book from now on, but this, I guess, is an example of how my FOMO paid off. Thanks, world, for the FOMO. Favorite new author. And for this, I want to say a quick Mezzi. This is the closest I can get to a truly favorite. But this is an author that I read first last year, but I've now read 2 more of their books this year. And it's because of that I feel much more comfortable, that is, to say, oh, they are a favorite author. I think I'll talk about it in my Queer Lit Readathon vlog, how it's becoming very difficult not to just say that they are an outright favorite of mine. I'm not quite there yet, like not up there with Chami McGuire or even James Baldwin or Octavia Butler, but very close. And I think probably takes one more out of the ballpark book for me to say solidly they are forever all-time favorite. Enough for me to keep reading. If we want a truly new author, the closest I would say, based off one book, would be Ted Chiang. If I do all-time favorite authors or favorite authors of the year at the end of the year, he won't be on that list because I don't think there are any other books for me to read by him. And I think for that kind of list, I would need at least 2. But for this, I'll say that as far as the newest author that I'm most excited for, that I will be buying the newest works for, it's going to be Ted Chiang. It's too soon to say he's a favorite, but he definitely has the potential. Okay, newest fictional crush. And now we're getting to questions that I absolutely hate. It always just stresses me out so much. Like, I thought it was for so long. I managed to talk myself into an excuse, but if I'm being honest, I can have bigger crushes on authors than I do characters. If I see a character that I'm like into, I tend to project the author onto them. But for this, I'm gonna go with The Stranger. And I just realized I had this to hold up. The Stranger. I was prepared for this video, and I now have more editing despite the prepared. The Devours. The Stranger in this book. This book is effectively a werewolf story in the same sense as Interview with the Vampire, where a quote-unquote werewolf is telling the story of his past and his people, being told to an unbelieving sort of journalist. This time it's a professor. To say it is similar to Interview with a Vampire, well, not wrong, is just the tip of the iceberg. There was so much more to this than that book. And there is some serious sexual tension that may or may not be explored in this book between our main character, this monster, this inhuman monster, and our main character. More like our narrator who is being told the story. And I was very much here for the sexual tension to an extent that I do feel this crush or sexual longing for the monster in the story. Like, it's terrifying as some of the moments were in this book, and as triggering and uncomfortable as some of the sexual parts of this book are. The relationship between the monster telling the story, and our narrator who's sort of being told the story or who's relaying it to us, that relationship really resonated with me. So like, if I had to long for one of them, it would be the monster. And you have to read the book to really get it. But I will say again that it's a very dark, disgusting book, and it deals with some heavy stuff, and just don't come to it lightly. Favorites of the year, this is up there, I promise you. So good, lovely writing, and if I had to say a crush, it would be this. Again, that took me way too long to figure out they were a crush of mine, partly because when I approach these questions, I've gotten to the point where I've gotten better at reviewing books, because while I'm reading a book, I'll think about the things that matter to me and make a note of them in my mind. If I don't actively think of the question while I'm reading a book, it will not stick to me like that fact that maybe I will love a character, maybe I will crush on a character, but my feelings in that way towards a character don't really stick because I don't consciously think about it. It's one of those things that just happen in passing. I probably need to start thinking about these questions more actively while I'm reading, at least for the first 6 months that I'm going to be doing this tag, because it'll make it easier, I think, to start saying this is a favorite character or a favorite crush or something. And this next one is hard because I still don't really think about, oh, I love this character, at least not enough in a way that it sticks. So I still struggle in the same way to figure out who's a favorite character. I don't know. And I'm going to go with one that, I don't know, just kind of stuck out when I went through the list of books that I read this year. I'm going to go with Jack and the Wicker King. And if I were to reread this book, I might retract this statement here. But based off what I remember from this book, I really liked Jack. I mean, at least how he stood with his friend. Basically, these two teen boys are best friends, and one of them starts to have hallucinations where he sees this sort of fantastical world hidden behind our own. You give me very Bridget Terabithia vibes. There's a question of whether or not what he's seeing is real versus mental health issues. When you look at it from a mental health issue, the way Jack handles it with his friend is somewhat problematic in some ways. But in another way, there's a level of bondage and trust. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but basically he sticks beside his friend throughout all of that to give him support. And I really liked that. I also just loved the relationship between the two of them and the sexual tension that existed. But that's, if you want more on that, I'm pretty sure I talk about this in my Blackathon reading vlog. Book that made you cry, and I'm adding on something here, aka made you feel bad. Because books don't usually make me cry. If they do make me cry, it's because they make me think of something triggering to like my own family or my own personal issues. Not necessarily because I feel in the book in a way that makes me cry. And it's kind of a convoluted answer, but a book that made me feel bad, or that really excited a lot of disdain and anger and sadness for a myriad of reasons, not just for the character, but also sort of my own ability to relate, would be Dreadnought by April Daniels. And this is a contender, I think, for our biggest surprise, because this is a YA superhero book. And not only are superhero stories being overdone, I tend to dislike YA fantasy / sci-fi books. I don't trust them. I know there are exceptions that I can find. but there are also some that are just really bad. And I was really worried about this one, but I liked this book, not just for the story, but also for the writing. I thought it was really solid, especially as a YA book. I felt like it worked for me as an adult. I didn't feel like I was being talked to as if I was a kid. But this is the story of a trans girl who is a teenager who basically becomes a superhero. She gets the power of this Superman-esque person who dies. She has to take on the weight of that. But at the same time, she is trans, and she is reckoning with coming out as trans. Getting these superpowers, something about the superpowers allows her to sort of reshape herself to be her perfect self, to be the person she is, that she's always wanted to be. And that part of that means a quite literal transition from her previously male-presenting form that she was born as to the idea of the kind of person she felt was right for her, who she truly is. What we have in here is a traditional superhero story, but wrapped around that is a repressive family and a repressive society, at least in some ways, that are some ways supportive but also judgmental towards her transness. And what we have here basically is an intersection of superhero stories with a trans story, and it allows the author to explore these two ideas in a way that I think is really unique and new, and I thought it worked really well. Not only just to sort of convey some of the issues of what it's like to be trans, but also what it's like to exist in sort of a fundamentalist Christian society in an abusive relationship or with abusive family members, and trying to reckon with that when mental health is such an issue and it's driving mental abuse and sometimes physical abuse of the children. And then, of course, just the existence of TERFs in society. And I really absolutely adore this. What was my question here? This book upset me. Like, I didn't cry, but it was upsetting. Part of the reason it resonated so strongly was because of the fact that it was so upsetting. And I think it's because of the intersection of that trans representation in the superhero story that made it so good. This isn't a review, at least it's not supposed to be, but I will say that one caveat is, it does sort of fall in the trap of still being another superhero story. That's the only flaw in the story. But overall, I think it stands out for the reasons I've already highlighted. Okay, a book that made you happy. Another one that I found hard to answer, because what is happiness? I don't mean that like an existential way, like we can't be happy. Like, obviously, plenty of books make me happy, but is a book that makes me happy a book that just has this happy-go-lucky attitude about the world? Or is it a book that I just leave extremely happy about? Because there are some pretty dark books that I leave like, wow, I love that. That was fantastic. And I like have an overall happy feeling about a very dark book. The Devours is a perfect example of that. But I'm going to go with a book that generally just like, I really liked it, even though it's not the best book. And that's going to be Into Every Generation a Slayer is Born. Can you see my shirt? Because I have like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast shirt on. It's because I love Buffy. This story is basically recapping the Buffy storyline, while also talking about the issues and sort of the production side of it, and the issues that existed within that, including the issues around Joss Whedon. And I really like that discussion. I think the outline of the story could have been better. The storytelling itself, the writing was fine, but not exceptional. This book at the whole had its issues. It was not a perfect book, but I gave it a firm 5 stars because it made me happy, because I am dying for Buffy the Vampire Slayer content, and this did enough to make me love it. It's one of those things where it has a very high threshold for failure, or very very high threshold for failure, meaning he would have had to done a lot worse for me to give it anything less than 5 stars. And I'm okay with that. So yeah, I love it. I do want to do a deeper review of it, but I need to do, I think, a reread of it to do that. But still, a book that made me happy, because I loved it. I just loved having that book to read. I read it as soon as I found out it existed. Okay, the most beautiful book you've bought this year. I started to get to show you a book that I had read, but it says bought. So I'm going to focus on books that I've hauled. I'm going to use a book here that I don't think many people probably think is beautiful, but I do. I'm going to call this Hellbound Hearts. This is an anthology relating to Clive Barker's series or books, The Hellbound Heart, or, based for the movie Hellraiser. And this is a sort of dark, demonic, artsy face, sort of embodying the world of the Cenobites and the Hellbound Hearts. And I just love it. I love the style here, and it looks phenomenal. And while it is dark and creepy and disturbing, there is a beauty in that disturbingness nature of it. And I'm here for it. I love this cover. It is gorgeous. So yeah, beautiful. Finally, what books do you want to read by the end of the year? Sure, let me give you all 45 to 50 books that I plan on reading the rest of the year. Now, this was hard, not just because, there are a lot of books I want to read, but because as much as I plan far in the future, there's still a great deal of ambiguity that exists in my planning for the future. And I've gotten to the point where I know I have general ideas, authors or genres that I want to explore per month. Sometimes I'll get particular books, but generally speaking, when it comes to that month, it won't be till that month that I'll decide exactly which book I'll pick up. So it's hard to say exactly what I'll be reading. But what I've done is I've tried to pick one book for every month, so 6 books total, each one being a book that I think I have a really good chance of reading or something similar to it. So with that, let's go ahead and go through each month, starting with July. So part of what I want to do is I want to continue reading books, series that I have started or not continued. And the first one is going to be the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer. I love the movie because it was just so weird. And I liked the book when I first read it. This sort of, alien biology thing and coming in and changing DNA, infecting the Earth. It's really weird and surreal, but it was also very confusing. I read this back in 2017, maybe 2019. And I was confused, very confused. And I'm hoping I can return to it and understand it better. This is going to be on my July TBR. If you haven't seen it already, it will be. What I will say is I plan on rereading the first one. I may or may not go through and read through them all at once for 1 month. I haven't decided yet. Otherwise, I plan on taking it one per month. But this is a series I want to return to and that I want to close out, or at least make a decision. If I'm not going to finish it, dean out the series. Next up is a book that I keep planning to read every month and then postponing because it's a bit of a doozy. There's no doubting that. It's like a fucking textbook. Abraham Lincoln Alive, Volume 1. Michael Burlingham. This is Volume 1 of 2 autobiographies of Abraham Lincoln, and it's a chunker. We're talking like 1,000 pages. This shit's long, and if I'm being honest, I wouldn't buy this again if I didn't already have it, but I do, and I'm interested enough that I don't want to unhaul it. But at some point I have to start reading them, so I really want to get to this. And right now I was planning for July, but with recent overturning Roe versus Wade, I'm going to be focusing my American government nonfiction readings on stuff more closely related to that theme than for this. I'm going to push this off to August right now is the plan. While I don't know if I'll read this all in 1 month, my goal is to maybe split it across 2 months, but I do want to start this. It's one of those books that I know that can sit there for years and I'll never read it if I just don't make a deliberate point to do it because of all the sort of intimidating aspects of it, right? Okay, next up, we're going to be 2 of my Library of America editions. As I've talked about in the past, I have Library of America books, and most of them I want to read through all of that author's works, or at least try to. One author that I've yet to even begin that I want to get into is going to be Kurt Vonnegut. And this early first volume that I have, I think he has like 5 volumes for Library of America. I resisted the urge of buying all 5 and decided I'm going to buy the first one first. And once I've read through all of these, I'll let myself buy the next one. And I stand by that decision for now. This is several of the ones, Player Piano, Siren of Titan, Mother Night, and Stories. I've heard various things about Kurt Vonnegut and some of the problematic aspects, but in particular, I think I'm going to be focusing on Sirens of Titan, which is a sort of a sci-fi story. And I think it might relate to Stephen King's Langoliers and even the sort of time cops, time monster entities from that season of Rick and Morty. And I'm not sure that's quite the same thing, but I think that's what the Sirens of Titan are. Something to do with the nature of time. And I'm hoping it's something speculative like that. If it's not, oh well. But I'm giving it a shot. It's my first Vonnegut. You might say, Josh, you should be reading The Slaughterhouse 5. But I do want to. But right now, I want to focus on my Library of America edition. That's the goal of this one. In addition to this, I don't have it on here, but I am hoping that I might get to John Steinbeck again. I read one of his books last year, and I want to continue through all of his works. I have to say that because his books are so long, at least the ones I plan on reading next, I don't know if I'm going to get to them quite this year, so I'm not including on this list. One that I will definitely be getting to is going to be Shirley Jackson. I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Ooh, I am for real. And for this one, I'm reading them chronologically. I read The Road Through the Wall last year, among other ones. And the next one I'll be reading is Hangman. And if you don't remember, if you weren't here, check out my review for Shirley Jackson's A Rather Haunted Life by Ruth Franklin. That was my favorite nonfiction book and probably my favorite book of 2019, I think it was. or maybe was it 2020? In case it would have been right up there with Black Cabinet, but still, I adored that book so much. It's an amazing literary and biographical book. It made me want to read all of her works, such as these, and return to it when I'm done. So, I'm reading at least one of these this year. Right now, this is for my October TBR. I may try to fit another one in for September, but we'll see. Definitely one in October, but we'll see if I get through multiple ones. I'm also reading James Baldwin, but that's what I'm currently reading in June, so it's not really on my TBR, but that's another Library of America author that I have that I'm trying to push through. Anyways, done with the Library of America. Now let's talk about Carl Sagan. A Life. This is a biography, not an audio, but it's, you know, quintessential story of his life, some of the drama behind it. I've talked about it before on my channel. I haven't quite gotten to it, but my goal is hopefully to get to this and even do a Carl Sagan reading vlog for November. I've had that plan for the last 3 years. I planned it in 2020, didn't do it. Planned in 2021, didn't do it. This year, I'm hoping I push through and do it. I really want to read this. It is kind of dense, but I have the ebook version. I'll do text-to-speech. Should be okay, I think. I just want to learn more about him. I love Carl Sagan. I love his work and the things he did in his life. He died too soon, but if you don't know him, he was a scientist, an astronomer, planetary scientist, a big motivating factor of why I went into planetary science myself. And finally, for December, I have a reading vlog that I have been wanting to do indefinitely. Like, I think I planned it originally for December of last year or January of this year. I keep pushing it back, partly because I'm more excited for the theme than I am for the actual books. But one book in that theme that I am super excited for, that one of the biggest reasons I want to get to it, is Wonderland, a horror anthology of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It's edited by Marie O'Regan and Paul Kane. This cover, first off, is gorgeous. The theme of horror in Wonderland, like Alice in Wonderland is already borderline horror. Like, it's a nightmare come to life. And I love the idea of this embracing that. And I really want to get to it. It's on audio. But as I said, I have a reading vlog themed around this because I haven't read Alice in Wonderland. I do want to. I also have an Ellen Datlow anthology of stories that may or may not be horror around Alice in Wonderland. I have A Blade So Black, which I know is more popular. And of course, like I said, Alice in Wonderland itself. All those books I want to read. This one in particular, and right now I'm planning on December. That's where I see myself being this in. December is one of those months where I take things more lightly, not as intense, I guess. And this should be an easy enough vlog, right? We'll see if it actually happens. And those are the 6 books that I plan on reading for the rest of the year. This was a bit of a doozy type of tag. Hopefully I edit it down. Hopefully I get it up before the end of July. This shit's gonna take so long. I have a lot of videos to post. We'll see when it gets up. Hopefully not too long. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. Why don't you give me, let's just stick with Alice in Wonderland. Give me a heart, a cards, or even a rabbit, something to relate to Alice in Wonderland. Your choice. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Stay safe, and I'll see you all next time.